Yo, what is going on, everybody? This is Beanie, and welcome back to another player review. Today, we're going to be reviewing the new Player of the Month cards, and it's pretty. Honestly, they were pretty underwhelming this month. I did a stream whenever they came out, and they just, I don't know, they weren't that exciting. But there are still a couple of players who I think are definitely good enough to make it on your team under certain circumstances. So yeah, let's get into the player review. Okay, first up, we're going to talk about the 91 overall Eugenio Suarez card, and this is another one of those utility guys that they come out with for these Player of the Month cards. There are a lot of guys like this. The Jorge Polanco is another guy from this month. Chris Owings, Chris Taylor. There are a lot of guys who do a really good job of serving those utility roles, and this guy is really no different. He's more of an infield guy. He can't play in the outfield, but he can play almost anywhere on the infield, and he's a really good balanced hitter. Versus righties, he's not anything to write home about, but he is very solid, a guy who could certainly get the job done. And against lefties, he is a guy who just absolutely crushes left-handed pitching. This would be a really good guy to have if you had a left-handed third baseman with heavy platoon splits, maybe a left-handed shortstop with heavy platoon splits, maybe a first baseman, but I like having this guy in a more premium position. Even though his defense isn't anything to write home about, he doesn't have a lot of speed. I think that this is definitely a useful player, but definitely not an elite guy. I'm not a huge fan of this card, but I could definitely see an argument for putting this guy on your bench, and for that reason, I ended up giving him a fag of a 7.1. Next up is the 92 overall Neville card, and this is, man, it's just such a bad card. It really reminds me a lot of Craig Kimbrell, except this is a really, really poor man's Craig Kimbrell, because at least that Kimbrell can hit like 100. You know, this guy throws hard. You know, he's going to be running it up into the upper 90s and everything, but that Kimbrell really does have like an extra gear behind his fastball. But the big problem with the Kimbrell and with this card is that they don't have anything to offset it. That knuckle curve just isn't deceptive enough to be a good second pitch. You know, obviously this guy is really solid per nines. Not, you know, for a guy like this, man, you really want to have 99-99 because you have to have something, and this guy just doesn't. And, you know, he doesn't have great control or anything like that. His overall is probably inflated by his home run per nine. This just really isn't that appealing of a card. And it basically, I mean, if he had a changeup, this card is certainly usable. If he had a slider, this card is certainly usable. But man, as it is right here, it's just really not. I would not recommend going out and buying this card. I think he is a below average reliever. I typically am very favorable to relievers, but if you see this guy in Battle Royale, I would avoid him. If I would not pick this guy up for ranked seasons. I'm sure Neville is a great person, and he is a great player in real life, but in this game, he just does not work, and I ended up giving him a fag of a 4.9 because I do believe that he is a below average player overall. Next up is the 91 overall Dylan Bundy, and as opposed to that Neville card, I actually kind of like this card. I'm a fan. He has 164 combined hit and K per 9. That is well above the mark of 155 that I like to set. If you're a control guy, he has good walk per 9, good control. We don't really care about the control part, but the walk per 9 is definitely nice. His pitch selection is about as good as it can get. Four-seam slider, changeup, sinker, curveball. You know, he has that. If he were just four-seam slider, changeup, curveball, I may be a little more hesitant to give this card a huge grade, but the fact that he has a sinker to go along with those four other pitches is awesome. He has great stuff, 83 velocity, 89 break. Just overall, a very, very solid pitcher, a guy who I think definitely has an argument to be like a top 20-ish guy. A guy who, if I saw, I wouldn't be excited. Like, there's some pitchers that whenever I see my opponent is throwing them, I'm excited because I know I'm about to tee off on them. This guy, I would be a little more hesitant to do that. I think that this guy could definitely be a useful guy in your rotation. So because of that, I ended up giving him a fag of an 8.3. That is subject to, I have bought this card and I do plan on using him some. So I could end up changing my mind on it, but for right now, I think that this is a really good card, and I gave it a fag of an 8.3. Next up is the 87 overall Mitch Moreland card, and it's just another left-handed first baseman. Now, this guy is a little bit more intriguing because he can play the outfield as well, but even outfield is loaded, first base is loaded, so he's just really not that exciting. The one thing, it does kind of set him apart, though, that he has 86 defense. That 86 defense is pretty intriguing. That means he's going to be fairly reliable over there at first base, but he doesn't have great reactions. And typically, when I look at defense for the corner infielders, reaction is more important than fielding, because that Olay animation, the way you prevent that is by having really good reaction. But as a hitter, this guy is very solid, but not anything really special for a first baseman. So because of that, I couldn't give this guy too high of a score. But because of the fielding, because of the fact that he does hit righties pretty good, I thought that he is definitely an above average player. So I ended up giving him a FAG of a 6.2. Alright, now moving on to the 86 overall Luke Weaver card, and this card is kind of weird. He has a 156 combined hit and K per 9, which is above the mark that I like to set for the minimum of where I think a starter should be with their per 9s. His stuff isn't terrible. It's not great by any stretch, but it's not terrible. 71, 79 velo and break, but where this card really starts to break down is in his pitch selection. Four-seam, changeup, curveball, cutter. That cutter maybe can act, somewhat like a slider, but for the most part, I'm not a big fan of this guy's pitch selection, and because of that, I don't know how usable he's going to be in ranked seasons, and he doesn't have like elite per 9s, or and he doesn't throw like 98 to kind of offset that. So it's kind of the whole package that I'm taking together here, and I think it makes him an above average pitcher, but definitely not one who I would consider putting in my rotation, or really using in any capacity, except maybe like very narrowly tailored events or something like that. So because of that, I ended up giving him a FAG of a 5.8. Okay, this next card I actually really like. I think that this guy has a ton of utility in like a bench role or playing in events, or I would love to have this guy in Battle Royale. And this is a Jorge Polanco card. I think that this guy could... I think that it would be wrong if you saw this guy in Battle Royale and you had like a couple other guys who were just okay, but maybe their overall was a little higher. I would take this guy over a lot of guys in that situation. And the reason is one, he's a switch hitter. Two, he hits both sides of the plate really well. Three, he has a good bit of power. Four, he can play a bunch of different positions. Five, his defense is not great, but it's fairly reliable. He's not super slow, so he's not going to, kill you on the base pass, but he's not going to be an asset on the base pass either. But this guy is just awesome for the most part. Like, I'm definitely considering putting this guy on my bench in ranked seasons. I'm definitely considering using this guy a lot in Battle Royale and in events and stuff like that. I've bought him. I think that this guy is going to be severely underrated for the most part this year. Obviously he's not an elite player. He's not like, in the high 8s or the low 9s or anything like that. But if you, in the right circumstances, I think that this guy could be a huge asset to your team. And because of that, I ended up giving him a FAG of a 7.3. Alright, and finally, the reward for doing the Player of the Month, and that is the 93 overall Rhys Hoskins. And in my opinion, this is probably the worst final reward that we've had for the Player of the Month so far this year, which is really odd because you would think that they would keep scaling them up to where like the worst one would be in April and then the best one would be in September, October, stuff like that. But this guy is just really not that appealing. He doesn't, let's put his offense aside for the moment, but he's not a great defender. He plays left field and first base, so, you can kind of hide his defense, but good defense in left field is certainly a nice thing to have, and his defense is awful. Like, live series Matt Holliday, awful. Like, it's really bad. And he doesn't have the speed to really make up for it. He doesn't have a strong arm or anything like that. He just doesn't have a lot going for him aside from his offense. So his offense needs to be really, really good. Well, first of all, he's right-handed, so that automatically kind of makes him not as good as a left-handed counterpart. And but his offense is good for the most part. I mean, 84-93 is very good versus righties. 62-99 is good versus lefties, but your PCI is not going to be that big at all. It's going to be a pretty tiny PCI playing on Hall of Fame. It's nice to have that power, but man, a reverse split right-hander. I'm typically not a fan of those in the first place, like the Ryan Sandberg, the Dale Murphy, guys like that. I've never been big fans of hitters with that profile. I don't know. This card is really tough for me, guys, because I want to like it, because he can play two different positions, but neither one of them are really premium, and I don't think that this guy is a good enough hitter to make up for his deficiencies elsewhere. So if I were trying to, recommend player of the months to do to the missions to finally finish, I would say go for the James Paxton. And after that, honestly, I probably wouldn't go after anybody else, especially this Rhys Hoskins. I definitely don't think that this card is worth it. I think it's going to cost probably $100,000 to finish this mission, and I think that you could definitely find better ways to spend those stubs. Not a big fan of this card, even though I do think he is above average. So I ended up giving him a fag of a 6.6. I know that might seem kind of low for a guy who has 84, 93 versus righties and 99 power versus lefties. A guy who profiles as a really good hitter, but the fact is there are a ton of good hitters in left field and at first base, and this guy just doesn't measure up. So yeah, because of that, I gave him a fag of a 6.6. But guys, that is going to do it for this episode. Do not do this player of the month. I definitely don't think it's worth it. If you want to do one, I think the July one is the one with the James Paxton. I don't remember right off the top of my head, but in my opinion, that is the only one that's worth doing. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. So let me know if you liked it by liking the video, subscribing if you enjoyed it, and maybe sharing it with a friend. And later on today, or probably around 6:30, I am going to be streaming. I apologize for not streaming over the weekend. I went to the Southern Miss game. I got really drunk at the Southern Miss game, and then I came home. I passed out, and then I woke up the next day with an epic hangover. So I really didn't feel like streaming at that point. But yeah. Oh, you know what? Maybe this Carlos Correa would be worth doing too. He's pretty good as well. But aside from that, kind of ignore the rest of them. But yeah, guys, that is going to do it. So I will see you guys later on today. Peace!